just looking at the fairing that came with the bike because as we've discussed, it's missing the bracket inside the frame where your grab rail would bolt through to, and then this is the first time I've really had a look at it. Yes, it's a bit of a bodge. I mean, this was bolted on with a couple of galvanized bolts, and I don't know what's going on in the back here. It's all crazy stuff. It's a shame really, because it's all pretty good nick. Most of the connections are even these sorts of things haven't snapped off, so it'd be good if we can try and save it. So I'll gently take this apart. So we're already going to break something. You can see these are the bolts that were holding it together. Shame really, because that's the original fairing. It's not fiberglass. Oh, I see. I think there's some sort of hook. So whether or not we'll be able to glue this back to that, it's a bit of like detective work. Alright, so we don't want to lose this bit. Slim chance we could glue it on. Anyway, we might be able to use this as a template to fabricate the bracket, and just experiment. I mean, at least it'll be hidden, the bracket. But it, and the other thing is we're going to have to find a grab rail, which will be rare as hen's teeth. So now that the everything's off the bike, it's getting ready to strip this down to take the paint off. The only problem is this bit at the back. So I've just put the side panel back on to give you an idea, and you can see the two holes here. That's where the grab rail would be. But if we look inside, that's what these two brackets would be. So they've been ground off. We're going to have to fabricate something to come up here to at least mount the grab rail eventually, if I can find one. If not, we just use it as a location device for the rear of the bike, because otherwise it's just the plastic's got nothing really to grab onto. But then when I'm looking at it even more closely, it's obviously been pranged. If you can see, that's, I think, being kicked this way. It's got a big gouge underneath, probably where it's gone down the road somehow. And the same with this one is kicked up. So if you look at it from that side, it's got a crease in there, just in there. The impact or whatever's been coming from this side and it's pushed everything across. It may have mangled this bracket. That's why they decided to cut it off. And so for us to be able to bend that straight, we need to bolt it down. So then I can basically get a bar inserted in there, maybe apply a bit of heat, and then with the bar just sort of wiggle it or bend it, just to sort of get it proportionally straight. Straighten these up and then fabricate a new bracket. So for us to bolt this down, we're going to need the bike platform or stand, because then I can strap it rigid to this stand, because really I'm doing so much work on the RZ. This is the EXUP is sort of snowballing, so we'll have to put the RZ on hold for a bit. And what I plan to do is just get the rear wheel in so we can take this off, wheel it around the workshop and then put the RZ on there. So yeah, there'll be a couple of videos on basically getting this straight so we can wheel it off. So now we say goodbye to the EXUP for a while. We've got to make space for the RZ250, so yeah, we'll say cheerio for maybe 6 months, a year or so, till the other one's finished. So we'll just wheel this out the way and I'll park it up in the garage, cover it up, and we won't start on this again until we've finished the other bike. So see you later. The frame's up, ready to strip the paint off. I've sort of clamped it down with a couple of tie downs and put it sitting resting on these axle stands. Just made up a temporary post at the front so I can obviously stop it from falling over, and also it means I can probably assemble the steering head bearings, etc. Yeah, so now the fun job of stripping off this paint. Sure, you could send it away to get it sandblasted. I did get some quotes once to sandblast frames, and to be honest, it was, you know, pretty expensive. They're asking $250 just to blast them all. Anyway, we put a bit of a normal paint stripper on there and just scrape it off. Anyway, this is going to be a slow job, so put some tunes on and see you in a day or two. Bit of a slow job, but it's sort of satisfying getting in the nooks and crannies. I think you've got to have the patience of a saint. To be honest, you know, if you've got the cash and you haven't got the time, get it sandblasted. Even if you're going to paint it yourself, this is taking, you know, quite a few hours to clean up. I don't mind doing it. So, and also for people who can't get access to a sandblaster, it's doable. It just takes a lot of time. The trick is, I think, is to work on just on a section. So just work on the top half of the tube, clean that bit off, move on to the next section, and repeat, rather than try and do the whole frame, because the paint stripper will dry out too quickly and it doesn't work. If you leave it longer than 15 minutes, it sort of goes hard again. So yeah, like I say, just a small section, and then we're only doing the top side. When it's all, most of the stuff I can get to, we'll flip it upside down and just clean up the bits that we've missed, and then pressure wash it clean. I've just jet washed the bike now. It's the only time I jet wash a motorcycle, I think, is in these situations. I never jet wash them now once they're fully built, because the water just gets in bearings and stuff. Anyway, so I've just washed it in sort of like a degreaser with a big stiff brush, just to work in the corners and stuff, just to make sure there's no residue left as much as possible. And then using a jet washer with the strong action on it, it takes you can actually take the paint off almost. Yeah, so it's come up pretty good. Good enough, I think, to repaint. But it's interesting, you can see the weld splatter, original weld splatter, is still there. In fact, there's loads of spots all over the place. Yeah, like underneath here you can see all these weld splatter marks. I'm not going to bother taking them off because it makes it look original, I suppose. So even down here, you've got these big nodules. That's fine. That's how they used to make them. So, in fact, the frame itself is actually quite complex. Quite an intriguing design. Maybe I've got it up on its end just to dry out in the sun. Yeah, it's quite a complicated shape. You can see why they went for aluminium frames. It's much stiffer and lighter and less complex. I think there's a lot of work in here. You know, I assume these are all manual welds all over the place. It would have taken a while to fabricate these. So next up is just going to wipe it down with wax and grease remover, and then start covering it with rust converter, because obviously where there's all this rust has come through, we need to make sure that gets at least converted or made inert. And you can see it's already, just even in that little pressure wash, you're getting a surface rust beginning to pick up. So we can't leave it too long. Anyway, a couple of hours in the sun, and then we'll get it in the shed and cover it up. So I'm just going over the bike again. I've just air pressure hosed it all off so there's no dust. And then this is just wax and grease remover. Get it from most auto spare shops. I found putting it in a little old second-hand spray bottle is best, and just spray it on, and then just keep rotating the cloth over. Ideally, the cloth should be lint-free, but I mean it's gonna be cleaned up again. So anyway, the idea is to get rid of any residual dirt and grease that might still be on there. So I've sort of gone all over the bike with that, and now we just whack on some rust converter like we did on the exhaust pipes, just enough to ensure it doesn't get that film of rust come back. It's very runny, so it goes quite a long way. You only need like a capful, and it'll just run right on the metalwork. It's not paste. And then we'll leave it on for 15 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes. And then once it's finished, we have to wipe it off again with wax and grease remover or terps. Look at that, you can see how it sort of just runs everywhere, which is good, because then it gets into all the nooks and crannies. I've got the base of the bike stand level with the spirit level. I've also checked that this bar here that goes through the swinging arm pivot bolt, which is probably the critical point, is level, parallel to the base. And you can see the top of the rail is parallel pretty much all the way along. Same up here. I mean, it's not accurate, but it's pretty level. But then when we see on the back of the frame, it begins to lift up on this side, and it gets more pronounced as we get towards the back. In fact, sitting on the seat where the seat registers, you can see this side is a lot higher, and then at the back, same again, and then yeah. So we can see that when I measured it, this is about 20 mil higher than that side, so we're going to have to bend this one down quite a bit, which will be fun. Here I'm just going to quickly bend this straight, just use a couple of clamps and a block of steel, and you can see at the back there how bent that is. So it's pretty straightforward. It's always good to use some sort of straight edge to help you. And this is pretty mild steel, I mean soft steel or thin steel. So we've got that nice and straight. Easy. That's nice and straight now. This one's not too bad, so probably just leave it. Oh, it's got a small bin. I might just do the same on that one so it's perfectly straight. Easy job. So I've strapped the spirit level onto the crossbar, and you can see just how far out it is at the moment. And I just machined up a bit of scrap bar stock and pushed it as far as I can down that tube, and then with a bit of galvanized pipe I'm sort of bending, but the bending action is only the last 3 or 4 inches. It's certainly bringing down the height of the tubes to be parallel, but I really want that crossbar to be level as well, and you can see it hardly made any movement on it. What we're going to try and do is bend this down. What I don't want to do, and that's what's happening, is this last section is just bending. It's actually a lot straighter now, which is good, but I need to get this height here down, and really we've got to pivot it around this sort of point here if we can, so we're not tipping the whole bike, forcing the whole bike over. So it's acting like a fulcrum point. So it's just a piece of scrap steel. I've welded a foot on it, and it's sort of clamped in here just because there's a natural crease where the pipe is bent in manufacturing. You can see probably on this side a bit better. Or is it here? There's a crease. Just try and focus on that. Yeah. And that sort of, so it's like a natural pivoting point or bending point, I suppose you call it. But obviously with this fabrication, it's pretty stiff. Anyway, that might help this fulcrum point to get that sort of last section just, I'm talking a few mil. But yeah, the problem is, even with that solid bar in there, it's just bending at that point, which is okay. I mean, it's a lot better than it was. This is now sort of, it's more in line with each other. Probably come down a little bit more, but not much. But what I'm trying to do is get that back end, these points coming down. So yeah, I'll machine up this bar. Where is it? Where did I put it? Yeah, so this just again a piece of scrap bar. Can't remember what it was from. It just needs a couple of mil taken off, so it can go further in, because at the moment it sort of stops about there. But if I can get it in just I don't know, a few more inches, I think. So we just add more into that last section. That might work. So I'll just machine that right off to just to this sort of point and drive it in. And then if it still doesn't bend, I might have to get some heat on that. Okay, what I've found, and we've improved it a lot over what I was doing yesterday. Even with this bar in, it's just flexing, like I say, on this last section. I can't get enough leverage forward to lift this down. I didn't think this would work, but all I've done is got a tie down ratchet, and what I did is put tension into the subframe. Obviously apply the load as much as I dare. and then just apply some heat. I don't know if you can see the bubble moving across. And just crank it up a bit while it's still a bit hot. And then apply more heat. And the idea being, once it goes cold, hopefully it won't spring back. So that's gone a little bit over that way, and I'm hoping that once it cools down, we let the release the tension, and hopefully any spring back will be mitigated. That's the theory anyway. Anyway, I think it's a lot better than it was, and it's, like I say, it's the rear subframe. It's not going to mess around with the suspension. That's too far forward. The forks, swinging arm, it's all out of the equation. Yeah, so that's obviously lost its cherry red now, and I'll see if I can just gently release. There's a lot of tension in this, like a rubber band. Okay, so I've released a bit of tension. It's obviously springing back, so I might let that cool down a bit more. Okay, I think I've bent it as much as I can. So it's down this side, so we'll let that cool off again. We'll release the tension and see how it goes. I'll just take the pipe off. Hey, actually, it's gone a little bit too far, ironically. Let me just push that. Wow, of course, this is what happens. I put a lot more heat on it that time, and I'll let it cool down, because as it cools, it probably springs back. So we'll give that a good 10 minutes just to cool off, because that'll be sizzling hot. So it's cooled off now, and I think we're good. Well, I think we can't get it any better. So we'll level right here. We'll level here. We'll level just after the tank. The seat rest is level. That's probably as good as I'm going to get it. So that's fraction lower than I'd like it, but we're talking maybe a millimetre or so. It's probably a bit of distortion in the metal itself. And then right at the back here, just make sure that's square with the frame. We're level as well. So I think that's it. That's good. The only thing I'd like to do is, yeah, that's better. Yeah, I've just made this a bit rounder, because this was like squashed flat a bit underneath. So it looks a bit better. I mean, no one's going to see it, it's hidden, but try and get it as good as we can. But this just needs to come in 2 or 3 mil. It's just kicked out a bit. I'm going to put a straight edge in there. And when I look at these holes, when I line them up on the mudguard, that one's a little bit out. So to bend this one over, I'm going to lay the whole thing on its side, put the bar in and just, again, push it over. And the next step is we'll grind off these and then we can fabricate the bracket. I think that's enough for this week.